Good morning. For any of you that don't know us, we're Andrew and Marion. We've been coming to St Michael's for around 7 years now, and it would be fair to say we've been quite involved in some of the children's work and some other things over the years. As Lucy said, we're here to tell you a little bit about our 2020, to share a bit of what sometimes gets referred to as our testimony. It's a story, it's a tale about when people have seen God at work in their lives. The passage we just read in Mark reminds us that God can and does step into people's lives. In this passage, here was Jesus, who even the people he'd grown up around were questioning him and doubting him. He showed love and compassion. Even in a place that was rejecting him, and we're told that he could not do any miracles there, except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. So 2020 was a year many of us will never forget, no matter how hard we try. I think it would be safe to say none of us knew what was coming. Back at the start of the pandemic in March, while COVID still seemed to be something that was happening somewhere else, Marion, our daughter Annabelle, and myself found ourselves with temperatures, aches, pains, and no sense of taste or smell. Self-isolation began. About 9 days later, I felt better, and I started emailing people saying I'll be back at work on Monday. It's all gone, it's not a problem, we're good. Sunday morning, I woke up at about 4 AM. And I felt a little bit strange. The world was a little bit fuzzy. I was breathless. I knew something wasn't right. But given Marion hadn't been well, I decided not to wake her. So I sat on the side of my bed. Sometime after 7, Marion woke up naturally. She got out of bed and walked round to go to the bathroom. And all I remember is her saying something about me being blue. And within seconds she was on the phone asking for an ambulance. When the paramedics arrived, they were great. They took my blood pressure, temperature, my heart rate, they talked to me, and then at one point one of them put one of the little oxygen meters on a finger, and then very quickly moved it to another finger, and then very quickly moved it to the other hand. And then turned to his colleague and said quite loudly and quite firmly, "Oxygen now, please." I glanced down at the oxygen meter and it read 60. Now I'm not medical, but I knew it should be above 90. I didn't know how bad 60 was. Apparently at 80 you were at severe risk of organ failure. So they put the oxygen on me and turned it up full. And my reading came up to about 80, 81. I remember then walking down the stairs, heading to the ambulance. Things were beginning to feel a bit swimmy, if that's a word. As we passed down the race course and I was in the back of the ambulance, and I thought to myself, it must be really busy out there, because they've got the siren and the lights on. I didn't think it would be that busy on a Sunday morning in lockdown. I got to the hospital, and within minutes I had 2 doctors and 2 nurses descend on me. And they started taking all the measures again. And then they started asking me really complex medical questions. Things like my name, what day was it, could I count from 1 to 10? As I say, really complex medical stuff. I remember then they put a second oxygen supply under my nose. These little things that stick up your nostrils, because they said they needed to try and increase the oxygen into me, to just try and keep me at 80. The doctor then told me that it might be a good time to phone my wife. What I didn't realise at that time was it was that phone call. Phone your wife and tell her you love her, because you may not get another chance. I can't remember the conversation. I just remember being convinced I had to make Marion feel reassured that all I needed was a little bit of oxygen and I'd be home later that day.
Okay, I'm sorry about my height, obviously, but as I'm sure you can imagine, seeing your husband turn blue and struggling to breathe was a bit of a shock. I managed to hold myself together until the ambulance crew got there. The 999 operator I spoke to was amazing at keeping me calm so that I could keep Andrew breathing until help arrived. But when they came, I was suddenly superfluous. So I did the only thing I could. I put out the call for prayer. My life group has a signal on WhatsApp for when you need urgent prayer. We call it a flare. You don't have to explain why you need it, but if you write flare, you're flooded with the immediate comfort of knowing you're being prayed for. I sent out the flare at 8:40 a.m. My message simply said, "Flare, Andrew," followed by ambulance here. I knew then that my prayer warrior friends were on the case. When Andrew had been taken away, after a brief cry with Annabelle, our daughter, I realised I had to let the family know. Fortunately, we have a WhatsApp group for that as well. The hard part was Andrew's mum. I had to tell a woman who'd already lost her other son Colin in a car accident that her one remaining son was in an ambulance because he couldn't breathe. It was awful, but she was very brave. Then my mind turned to practical issues of finding out where they'd taken him. I tracked him down to Cheltenham, but before I got the update from them, Andrew called Annabelle's phone and told us that he was going on a ventilator and that he loved us. Hearing this, I knew I needed to spread the net a bit wider for prayer, and so I contacted everybody I could think of, including a few people that Andrew had only ever told me about. That job done, the adrenaline started to wear off and I needed to go back to bed. The main symptoms that caused me the most problems with COVID was the fever. I did have the cough and the no taste and smell thing, but it was the high temperature that was the worst part for me. I hovered over 39 to 40 degrees despite regular paracetamol. It was exhausting. The relentless switching between feeling so cold that your whole body shudders with the shivering to the inevitable fire that follows. One of the reasons I got so sick was that I'm on immunosuppressants, so the infection really took a good hold. I think I slept for most of that day, I can't really remember. I only got up in the early evening to spend some time with Annabelle, who was a bit distressed, and needed some comfort. Although Annabelle had COVID, she was getting over it now, and I remember sitting on the sofa with a duvet wrapped around me. We must have been watching TV when I suddenly couldn't breathe. Bless Annabelle. She called for the ambulance and went through a similar thing that I'd gone through that morning with Andrew, with the added complication of her having to be left on her own at home. She was only 16. Social services couldn't help because she was still infectious. I hated to leave her. In the end, it was deemed that the risk to my life was too great for me to stay. I don't remember too much of the next few days, just feeling so cold. I remember the doctor explaining that the x-ray they did at resus showed typical changes of corona. I remember being swabbed and kept in isolation. I remember thinking how cruel they were by not giving me a blanket when the room was clearly freezing. I also remember feeling so guilty about leaving Annabelle and hoping that she would be okay. I felt frightened that both Andrew and I would die and she would be all on her own. When COVID was confirmed, I was moved to the board. I was the only woman in my bay, but it was a relief just to hear normal sounds around me. There was a TV on in the background, and just hearing familiar theme tunes really helped me keep track of time. I do remember waking one morning and realising that the two beds opposite that had been occupied the night before were now empty, and overhearing that both the men had died. I was put on oxygen through a full-face CPAP mask, huge thing, and antibiotics and steroids, but the most important thing for me was that they stopped my immunosuppressants. I was kept up to date about Andrew, and he remained critical but stable, which is a phrase I've heard a lot. I naively thought that Andrew got the easy option of sleeping through his recovery, and at that time I felt so awful I think I would have welcomed joining him. I also learned through a Christian nurse that the doctor in the resus was a Christian and she prayed over me. Unfortunately, despite all the efforts, I took a bit of a turn for the worse after a few days. My temperature rose to 41.5, and they moved me to ITU in case my organs started to shut down. My main thought at that point was that at least I would get to see Andrew again before I died. no longer upset about the possibility of dying, I just wanted it to end. The next clear thing I remember is waking up in ITU. I still had the big mask over my face and I could feel the air pressure and oxygen helping me, but I felt alert for the first time in days. I asked my nurse if she could point Andrew out to me, and I prayed towards him. I had a picture in my mind of angels surrounding his bed, and this gave me a lot of comfort. I was still a bit jealous that he got to sleep through it all. After 24 hours, I had improved enough to be sent back to the ward. On my way, I asked if I could see Andrew, and they moved my bed next to his for a few minutes. I was shocked by how ill he looked. His whole body was puffy and swollen, and he had a worrying number of tubes going in and out of him. I spoke to him and I prayed over him. I got to hold his hand and meet his nurses. That was when I realised I was grateful they hadn't needed to intubate me. It did not look as peaceful as I'd assumed it was. I got back to the same ward and all the people had changed. They were mostly women now. The guy who had the TV on, thankfully not died. He'd just been moved to a single room because he was getting better. While this was going on, the prayer request that I put out earlier had taken on a life of its own. There were now people praying for us all over the world. My mum and dad, who are not really churchgoers, had even got all their friends praying. My sister and dad had been busy keeping people informed about our progress, and to help, I started doing daily updates. I was also visited by the hospital chaplain, who prayed for me and Andrew. For reasons I won't go into now, Andrew and I have witnessed God's amazing healing through prayer before, and so I had no doubts that he was able. The chaplain asked my permission to pray over Andrew, and I agreed. A couple of nights later, I had what I thought was a very strange dream. I could see the heavenly host, thousands upon thousands of angels whose sole job was to watch and guard us. There was a battle going on against a horde of blackness. I asked the angels around my bed if I could help. One looked over his shoulder and said, "No need, the battle is already won, just watch." So I did. I had never experienced such a peace as knowing that all I needed to do was to be still and to know him. When I got up the next morning, Andrew's doctor came to see me to tell me that he was dying. They didn't expect him to last the day. His body was shutting down, and he'd stopped fighting the virus. His kidneys and other major organs were failing. I texted everyone with this news as I knew our only hope now was prayer. Linda Drake replied to my update with the verse that God had given her for me, 2 Chronicles 20:17. That is, "You will not have to fight this battle. Take up your positions, stand firm, and see the deliverance the Lord will give you, Judah and Jerusalem. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Go out and face them tomorrow, and the Lord will be with you." This confirmed to me the meaning of my dream. I didn't know if Andrew was going to live or die, but I knew that God was on the case and there was nothing I could do. No matter what happened, Annabelle and I would be okay. When I sent the message out, Mal asked if he could call, and when we spoke, he was amazing. We even started to discuss Andrew's funeral, which must have been awful for him. Unbeknownst to me at that time, the chaplain, who hadn't been allowed to visit Andrew yet, was finally let in. She came to see me later that day to let me know that she had prayed over him and anointed him with oil. The next day, the update from the ITU was amazing. Andrew had not died, as they'd expected, but against all of the odds, he'd started to improve. He was even trying to breathe on his own. Overachiever. His progress showed a steady improvement from that point on, and they eventually transferred him to Bristol to fill up the bed in Cheltenham. I had no doubt in my mind that God healed him. I also continued to get better and was eventually discharged. Annabelle had coped brilliantly with the support of Sally, my mum and dad, my sister, and the school in particular. For safeguarding reasons, it was decided not to let people know that I was in hospital. Someone phoned or contacted her every 2 hours during the day to make sure that she was safe. We are so unbelievably grateful to everyone who had a hand in supporting her when we couldn't. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for everybody who prayed for us. We would not be here without your faithfulness.
I have no recollection of my time in Cheltenham intensive care, but during that period I was having quite horrendous dreams. When I came to in Bristol 24 days later, I was scared, I was confused, I didn't have a clue what was going on, and I couldn't talk because I had a bit of tracheostomy in my throat. One morning, one of the ICU consultants called Kieran, who was a tall, thin, follically challenged Jamaican man, bounded into the ward and from behind his mask piped up, "Good morning, all you lovely people." And it just brought me back to a place of good memories, and it was just an amazing lift that I needed. After a few days he sat me upright and moved me to the edge of the bed. I just about fell off, but I realised I had no control of my arms and legs. They gave me a toothbrush and asked me to brush my teeth myself. After smearing some toothpaste in my hair and almost taking out my left eye, they decided that I needed something a bit safer to start with. So they gave me a little foam ball just to roll in my hand and to put down and pick up. It's amazing. In intensive care they've got devices that help you stand up. And once you've stood up they've got devices that help you walk. After about 4 days I made it away from my bed outside the pod into the corridor. The physiotherapists, or as most of the nurses called them, the physiotherapists, were amazing. They were hard taskmasters. They made me cry on more than one occasion. If you could do 10 steps, they wanted 12. The staff in Bristol were amazing as they tried to help me understand what I'd been through and what had gone on, and helped me build up my strength again. It felt great when they could remove my tracheostomy, and suddenly they found out that Andrew from Cheltenham wasn't a Cheltenham native. Don't know what gave it away. As I recovered in ICU, it was harder and harder as I became more aware of my surroundings, to hear what was going on in the pods around me, to hear the battles that the doctors and nurses were fighting, and sadly all too often losing. To see the beds with the grey tents on them going out the wrong door got really hard to cope with. My sister-in-law managed to drop in my mobile phone to the hospital. She worked in another ward, so she managed to get my phone to me. And after a few days, I actually managed to control my hands enough to switch it on and enter my passcode in time before it timed out. I cannot describe the lift I got that day when I saw 2,000 WhatsApp messages and over 600 emails from people who were praying for me, praying for Marion and praying for Annabelle. That was amazing to see that. A few days on, 2 of the consultants came back to see me and they wanted to sit down with me and go through exactly what happened. They told me that my right lung had collapsed and I needed a chest drain put in. That explained one of the tubes in my side. My left lung had debris in it from COVID and they didn't know whether that would clear or not. My kidneys, liver and pancreas had all stopped working completely and I'd spent weeks on dialysis. I had multiple hypertensive events and was on 3 different medicines for that every day now. I'd had 2 hypoxic events where I was starved of oxygen, and at first they were worried about brain damage. After they went through all of this, I think they could see I was rattled. I told them I had 2 questions. The first one was, what would my recovery look like? How long until I was back to where I'd been pre-COVID? The answer was somewhat chilling. They told me that the absolute minimum to have any quality of life again would be 12 months, much more likely to be 18 to 24 in reality. However, they had to stress, as they put it, people as ill as you've been don't recover. The others have all died. We cannot explain why you survive or how you will recover from this point on. We've no data to tell us. Unperturbed, I went for question 2. Did they think 4 weeks would be better than 3 weeks before I started trying to return to work from home? Or would I stand a chance of getting back in 2 weeks? One of the consultants I mentioned earlier came and just looked at me and suggested if I wanted to push myself, aim for 4 months and aim for an hour a day at the start. I went back in just over 2 weeks. I did 4 hours on the first day, although to be honest I slept for quite a while after that. Since I got out of hospital, it has been tough. I was discharged too early. I was desperate to be home. I'd not been away from Marion this long in over 20 years. Without the support of Annabelle, Marion, and so many of you and our neighbours, I couldn't have got through the last 12 to 18 months. It's been amazing to see so many so willing to help. But you know, God has been good to me over these months. My work had given me an 18-month contract, so I've got some certainty. It's made me so grateful for the love and support of others. I'm thankful now every day that I wake up that I have a new day in front of me. Also, I've had to reset what I think I can do, and there's so much I just need to leave with God now. I look back and see how God moved people and circumstances just so everything was right for what was going to happen. And I know that medically I should not be here. The doctors had done everything they could, but my body still gave up. But God wasn't and isn't finished with me yet. I still struggle with my left leg. Sometimes you'll see me with a stick. I have numb patches in it. I also have really sore patches in it. And my lower leg, if I stand still too long, goes completely numb and I can't balance on it. I'm also being left as diabetic at the moment, and I still have no sense of taste or smell. But I know God's still working on these things. He's not finished yet. When I first read the passage from Mark's Gospel we heard earlier, what struck me was the healing that Jesus did. And at the end of the passage, how the sick were anointed with oil and healed. It was only a month or so after I got out that I actually understood the chaplain had anointed me with oil and prayed for me. And after that, that's when I turned round. My prayer today is that each of us feels that real, tangible presence of God in our daily lives that helps us to know Him more, to be bold for Him, to show that love He has for us to others that we meet. Thank you.
Andrew and Marion, we are immensely thankful that God has worked this miracle and is continuing to work a miracle in you. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's very emotional and you are really brave. And we want to pray for you now as a congregation. I've asked a few people if they'd be happy to stand up and pray